Call of Duty Zombies is one of the most diverse and expansive modes in the entirety of the gaming scene, with its maps and storyline being something one could find extremely exciting and interesting. However, although this mode is very diverse and popular, there is a certain mode that is extremely hidden that I have not heard almost anybody talking about in the online scene as of making this video. Now you may think I am talking about the Black Ops 1 Zombies port that was made for the DS, or maybe even the cut Zombies Call of Duty game that would have featured exclusively zombies, but that is not the case. The game that I am talking about in this video is Call of Duty Online. Now, if you are unfamiliar with what Call of Duty Online is, don't worry, as I will cover everything you need to know about the game, as well as what mysteries lie ahead pertaining to the zombies mode within the game. So sit back, relax, this is gonna be a long one, and let's take a look at one of the strangest official Call of Duty Zombies experiences the mode has to offer, and what differences truly are present within the game mode. Before we get into the real zombies portion of this video, I am sure you are all confused as to what Call of Duty Online is and why it is such a undiscovered topic within the community. Call of Duty Online was a game first playtested in 2013 and officially released in 2015 by Raven Software and Tencent Games. Now you might be asking, why have I not heard anything about this game before? Well, the answer is simple. This game was only released and playable in China, which is extremely strange. However, this was the only Call of Duty experience China could get their hands on, as all other games relating to the franchise had been banned. With the past games being banned, it was no surprise that Call of Duty Online was essentially a complete melting pot for previous games within the Call of Duty series, taking inspiration from both the Modern Warfare and Black Ops series, as well as Call of Duty Ghosts, Advanced Warfare, and Infinite Warfare. It is safe to say just by hearing this that this was one of the most unique Call of Duty games we have ever seen, with its only real competition being Call of Duty Mobile, which, spoiler alert, was the reason why this game was shut down in late August of 2021, but we will look more into that later. Now, although this game was exclusive only to China, there were ways for people in other countries to get their hands on this experience. However, it was very complicated and clearly not intended, as in order to play this game you needed a Chinese citizenship code as well as a QQ account, which is essentially the Chinese equivalent of Facebook. Those who could get into this game quickly realized this game was extremely interesting, as not only did it have a completely unique campaign with weird plot twists, but it also featured other Call of Duty modes such as multiplayer, a battle royale, prop hunt, and of course, zombies. So now that you have a basic understanding of Call of Duty Online and what it truly had to offer, it is time to finally dive into the zombies modes, yes modes, and what this game truly had to offer. In the present day, defining what truly is the core gameplay of the Zombies game mode is generally more difficult compared to what it would be like a couple years ago. With new innovations to the Zombies game mode, with new experiences such as Outbreak, Modern Warfare 3 Zombies, and whatever Vanguard had to provide, it has become increasingly problematic attempting to define the true meaning behind zombies. However, with Call of Duty Online, it makes this debate even more difficult, as there is not one, not three, but 9 different modes within the game that include zombies as enemies. Now, it should be well known before we even begin talking about zombies that this is not the traditional round-based mode that we would generally see from a zombies mode from Treyarch, but I will dive more into that topic when we go over each individual mode. Before this unfortunate shutdown of this game, the 9 modes that included zombies were named Cyborg Rising, Ultra Zombies, Undead Siege, Doomday, Survival, Zombie Havoc, Aerial Reaper, Evacuation, and Deus Ex. Within each of these 9 modes were a collective total of 36 maps, which is honestly insane to think about, as within the total 6 years of this game release, the developers behind this game were able to create 36 maps, while it took Treyarch almost 3 extra years to match that number. Now, you will quickly find out that I will not be comparing this game to Treyarch Zombies, as the games are extremely different, and the quality of Call of Duty Online compared to any Treyarch Zombies game is extremely apparent. It is important to mention that each of the 9 Zombies modes just listed earlier each contain different difficulty settings, usually a easier difficulty called Ordinary, a more difficult experience known as Heroic, and what is essentially called a no-round mode. The key differences between these separate difficulties was the number of rounds it would take to complete any given map. For instance, the lower difficulty setting would obviously be attempting to achieve a lower round, while the Heroic difficulty would be attempting to reach a higher round, with the no-round mode essentially being a similar gameplay style to that of traditional zombies. Jumping into some of the maps in the game, one will quickly notice that the map recyclization is extremely present within this game, as classic multiplayer maps such as Raid or Standoff are heavily included within this mode. Some maps within the Zombies mode often overlapped with any other of the 9 Zombies modes present within the game, while also being present elsewhere in the game, such as within the multiplayer or the campaign, which also made it pretty evident how much corner cutting was done by developers with this game. If it wasn't already evident, this mode was extremely different to any other Zombies game we had ever seen. However, there were some differences that I believe are worth mentioning. First, this Zombies experience allowed you to carry 2 weapons as per usual from a Zombies game, but also allowed for a melee weapon to be carried alongside it for completely free, which is very interesting considering we are getting this exact idea in Black Ops 6 Zombies. From the rare gameplay clips I have seen about this game, it was very clear that the melee weapon was actually extremely overpowered depending on which one you used, which obviously made for some easy cheesing if you really wanted to. Another strange difference between this game and traditional Zombies was the fact that not a single wall buy was present within any of the maps in the game. This was counteracted by the fact that this mode featured a create a class type system in which a player could spawn in with any weapon found within the game, which was a cool feature that unfortunately could not be used on all of the maps within the game. Third, this game featured a pay to win feature with the idea of these revive tokens. These revive tokens could be used to essentially revive yourself if downed in exchange for a token, and was a extremely pay to win feature within the game, which is a common thing you'll see with Call of Duty Online. These tokens could even be used if your entire team was downed, which was another bold move by the developers, but hey, I suppose it is something unique. Another weird thing that I should mention while we are on the topic of pay to win items is the absolutely insane weapon skins and mastercrafts within this game. There are genuinely some of the most unique skins I have ever seen within a Call of Duty game as a whole in this Chinese Call of Duty Online game, even featuring a gun that literally uses a electric eel as a power source. But now that you have the basics behind this mode and what it truly can offer from a mechanics perspective, let us take a look individually at each of the modes to see the contrast of maps within this unique experience. Starting it off, the mode that was probably the most similar to the traditional Treyarch round-based zombies is found within a mode called Cyborg Rising. There are a multitude of similarities in this mode, however there also are many differences between this mode and Treyarch zombies. Right off the bat, you will quickly notice that all 4 maps within this game mode are actually reskins of the 4 original World at War maps, featuring a more technical side to what the game could offer. The names were also changed with these maps, as Nocturne Toten was renamed to Outpost, Verrückt was renamed to Mechanical Research Institute, Shinonuma was renamed to Evil Swamp, and Doerksen was renamed to Machine Manufacturing Plant. It is important to keep in mind that all of these translations are taken directly from the Chinese language and could have some discrepancies, but you most likely get the general idea of how these maps play out. Cyborg Rising included 3 different enemy types within the map: a cyborg robot type of enemy who was more or less like your traditional zombie, a cyborg dog who was just a reskin of a normal hellhound, and these alien creatures that walked around essentially throwing EMP disruptors. Now you might be asking, why does this mode not feature zombies and instead feature robots? Well, the answer to that is found within the Chinese censorship laws, and these censorship laws would be applied to a couple other modes within the game. However, these laws most likely were changed at some point during the game's life cycle, as other modes will feature zombies. Now, the way rounds worked in this this mode was different, because as mentioned earlier, the difficulty setting you chose would determine the amount of rounds you had to complete before exfilling, similar to what we see in Cold War and Modern Warfare Zombies. The point system is extremely different within this mode, as no longer did you earn points individually, but you earned these batteries that could be used to make traditional purchases such as doors, perks, pack-a-punch, and even ammo. The perks available in this mode were the original 4 seen in World at War, however their machines looked extremely different, and you will quickly find that these perks aren't actually as needed as they are in the traditional zombies we see today. The mystery box within this mode is somewhat familiar to the overall zombies player, however the box did not move as frequently and had a unique feature that I honestly love about this mode. When hitting the box, your only options of selection was either ammo, monkeys, the ray gun, the wonder wap, or the thunder gun, which is honestly insane to say considering that half of the box is just wonder weapons. However, it gets even crazier when you add the new elemental mines into the mix, each having their own unique abilities to help counteract the cyborg horde. I won't go too in depth into these, but there are a multitude of them, each doing their own elemental abilities to an extremely helpful extent, some even showing previous wonder weapon mechanics such as shrinking zombies. All traditional drops return within the game, such as the nuke and double points. However, after the dog rounds on maps such as the reskin Doerksen, the final dog drops a full battery power up. It also should be mentioned how difficult it is to train effectively on any of these 4 maps, as not only was the space not adequate, but the zombies seemingly hugging you from World at War returns. However, it is even worse within this mode. You'll also notice from this gameplay that there is an insane amount of numbers popping up everywhere, and for those not happy with what we see in Black Ops 6, then I think we should be a little bit more grateful, as we could have got something like this. Essentially, if you have played any of the World at War maps within World at War itself, you might actually be able to get around in this mode just fine, as the majority of strategies seen today for these maps could also be used in the newer versions of these maps. However, that is pretty much everything about Cyborg Rising, and I would easily say this is probably the most faithful to traditional zombies compared to what the other modes have to offer. Since we have discussed one of the more similar modes to what we see in Treyarch Zombies, I think it's time we shift our attention to a mode that is extremely unique. Ultra Zombies is one of the zombies modes that was offered, and it provided the player with 2 maps, one called Zombie Island and the other called Zombie Arena. Immediately when beginning to play this mode, the player will quickly notice the outlandish variants of different types of zombies, featuring some reskins from previous games while also featuring completely new bosses that we have never seen before. However, let's start by talking about Zombie Island, which I believe to be one of the coolest looking maps aesthetically in this game's catalog. Zombie Island was a beach theme map based heavily around aspects of pirates and fantasy, which is extremely cool as it goes out of its way to differentiate itself from other maps in the game. There was a multitude of zombies types on this map, such as the standard zombie, dogs that breathe fire, fat zombies that carried around cannons, crab zombies, teleporting zombies, and even an enemy extremely similar to the parasites seen in Black Ops 3. This map took 17 rounds to complete, or 14 if you were doing the ordinary mode, and this map was extremely unique as you were teleported to different parts of the map every couple of rounds. There were 4 unique areas of the map that the player had access to, each providing unique challenges as you progress through the rounds. Ammo was also not an issue on this map, as the ammo actually regenerated over time, providing the player with essentially infinite ammo. The coolest part of this map in my opinion, however, is the final mutated shark boss fight, in which you fight a shark on the beach similar to what we saw in Attack of the Radioactive Thing in Infinite Warfare, which was extremely unique and something I wish Treyarch did more of sometimes. While the Zombie Island map was cool, the other map featured in this mode, Zombie Arena, was one of the craziest experiences I have ever witnessed from a Call of Duty Zombies game. Essentially, this map was a huge stadium, very similar to a boxing ring, that sees the player facing off of a multitude of zombie types coming out of 6 separate entrances in the map. There are so many zombie types on this map, but just to name a couple for time's sake, there was a floating head zombie, Devil Nova zombies, armored zombies, and even a huge zombie with a hammer that kind of looked like the gravity hammer from Halo. This map took 15 rounds to complete, 10 on the ordinary difficulty, and on the very last round, a Exo Fire zombie boss came out out similar to what you would see in something like WWE and initiated a final boss battle. The boss battle is another fight that was extremely well done, with insane visuals that, although look choppy at times, were extremely awesome to view. It is safe to say that all of the Ultra Zombies maps provided amazing experiences to the player with unique bosses that have never been seen from any other mode, and overall I believe this is one of the stronger modes in the game. Alright, this next mode is probably one of the craziest, most outlandish modes within the game, so you guys better buckle up for this one. The next game mode I'm going to be talking about was called Zombie Havoc, and right off the bat when loading into this mode, you get to see these epic loading screens that honestly look like movie posters with the amount of detail put into them, which is something I adore about this mode. Additionally, this mode also sees these intro cutscenes from comic books, which is very similar to what we saw in Black Ops 1 and 2, except these were animated, which just added that extra flair. Oh, and for whatever reason, all dialogue spoken and sound effects were all in English. Not really sure why, but hey, let them do their thing, I guess. Essentially, what this mode offered was a linear mode that saw the player traversing through a large area, completing objectives along the way and defeating a final boss at the end of the level. For those who have played any of the Left 4 Dead games before, this mode is essentially the Call of Duty Online version, as it is very similar in gameplay and offers a more linear experience rather than a traditional round-based experience. The amount of maps in this mode can get confusing, but essentially there are 8 maps broken into 4 chapters with 2 parts to each chapter. The 4 chapters featured within this mode were the Fissure, Derailment, Clues, and Sign. As you progress through the map, you will quickly find these awfully familiar looking machines that may or may not be taken directly from Treyarch zombies in a new color scheme. The machines generally offered similar abilities to their perk representations, as the green Juggernog machine replenished health for the player, the double tap machine that pretty much had no changes to its design held more ammo for the player, and the wildest of them all, a Mule Kick Pack-a-Punch machine. This Mule Kick Pack-a-Punch machine offered a multitude of abilities to players, such as upgrading your level to enhance your stats, ability to change your class, and even the ability to drop your weapon for other players to use. These easily are the most blatant use of Treyarch assets in the game so far. However, this mode did not actually take place on recycled multiplayer maps like those of the past, but it did take place on campaign missions seen in the Modern Warfare series. Each chapter had its own unique story mission like I mentioned earlier, and I would hate to leave them all out, so I just wanted to quickly run through all of them so that you can get a basic understanding. Chapter 0 was the Fissure, and you would start by heading towards a church to find batteries for a generator inside, and once you completed that, a door would be opened and you would continue down a path battling zombies and dodging these really random green meteors falling out of the sky, and eventually you would find your way to a boss battle. The boss's name was the Corruptor, and he essentially had a multitude of attacks, but the most lethal was where he would roll around on the ground and destroy everything in his path. The next part of this chapter saw the player traversing a desert city, completing more objectives along the way, such as transferring vices and whatnot, and finally coming to the final boss called the Lord. This boss battle started out on a roof, but eventually saw the player going through a sandstorm into a desert arena, eventually destroying the boss with a mech similar to the one seen in Gorod Krovi. Next was Chapter 1 Derailment, and the first part of this chapter saw the player escorting a APC throughout the map until it eventually ran into a problem with these green crystal looking things, which the APC needed to clear. Once it cleared the crystals, the player continued escorting until they ran into a closed door in which they had to find a generator to power the door, and once that was completed, the escort would be cut and the player would find themselves in a boss battle. This boss was called the Hog, and it essentially was the exact same as the Corruptor, so nothing too notable there. The second part of this chapter saw the player once again escorting the APC, completing a multitude of miscellaneous objectives along the way until finally coming to the final boss with the Titan. This guy is a rhino looking boss that moved very slowly around the map that didn't really do anything too significant, simply shooting fireballs that the player had to avoid while also walking around the map. The next chapter, Clues, starts the player outside of a prison during the winter, essentially following a drone that would take the player around the map, eventually ending up inside the prison. If you couldn't tell from the gameplay, yes, these are all campaign missions like mentioned earlier, but hey, they have zombies, right? There was a really interesting section of this map where you had to traverse your way way through this fire sort of puzzle, which honestly wasn't all that difficult, but hey, it was unique. You then enter the gulag bathroom where the drone will scan the ground, and eventually the player would have to place mines on the ground to open up the floor below. Once jumping down and going through a little more zombies, the player would enter a boss fight with a person in a mech, once again similar to how Nikolai was in Gorod Krovi, but this boss was a bit more tricky. Ironically, her name was actually Sophia, but essentially she would charge at you with blades on her arms while also shooting EMP missiles that did not make the experience any easier. When you defeat her, she doesn't even die or break down, she simply just jumps out of the room you are in and disappears. The second part of this map begins in a garage with the moon excavator seen in the distance upon traversing the map. Once again, this player follows a drone, collecting DNA samples around the map and doing more scans on the ground and such, eventually making their way into a building, blowing up the floor, and getting into an elevator to take them to the final boss fight. The boss was called the Crier and was one of the more unique bosses in the game and was a great addition to the mode in my opinion. This is arguably one of the most difficult bosses in the game, as there were multiple stages that included a snowstorm filled with zombies, a crawl attack at the speed of light, and even a spike that launched out of his stomach that would insta-kill you if you were caught in it. The final chapter in the game, Sign, was strange, as it started with the player actually fighting soldiers instead of zombies, having to take down a multitude of helicopters and even dogs alongside them. Eventually, the player would find themselves defending a C4 before it blew up, and once it did, they would travel into a subway until eventually being brought out into yet another boss battle. This boss was called the Hound, and it was yet another mech that was pretty much the exact same as Sophia from the previous chapter, so nothing really too significant there. The second part of this chapter saw the return of zombies to the game, which was a very much needed addition after the last part, while also returning the escort mission with the APC. After escorting and defending the APC for a bit, the APC eventually needed to repair itself after falling multiple stories, which was strange, but you know, what isn't strange about this game? There was another appearance of a puzzle in this map as well, however, instead of fire, it saw the player traversing through electric beams that would shock and kill the player if ran into. Finally, after doing that, the final boss battle ensued with a boss called Nicholas the Guardian, who had one of the cooler entrances in this entire mode and was most definitely one of the harder bosses in the game. He had a multitude of attacks, including shocking the ground, running around the map, and even slapping you with his tentacle arms like he's Doc Ock or something. But with that, that is the finale of the Zombie Havoc mode, and it is definitely one of the more content-packed modes in this game, and seemingly was the most popular among the Chinese audience. The next mode in this catalog is called Zombie Survival, and it is very similar to the survival mode that was seen in Modern Warfare 2, just of course with zombies. Essentially, the player fights through waves of the undead, increasing their power and arsenal as the waves go on, with the ability to buy ammo and even kill streaks. To complete this map, you would have to go through 30 rounds on heroic difficulty, battling more returning bosses from previous modes such as hazmat zombies and the floating heads, with some maps featuring a final boss. The maps seen in this mode were also all multiplayer maps, and the maps featured in this mode were Raid, Standoff, Crash, Seaside, and Crossfire. What was strange about this mode is that there were a required amount of players to go into the game, as you needed 4 players to go into the game at once in order for the mode to be played. The mode apparently wasn't all that difficult, so the fact you had to do this was a little weird, but besides that, there really isn't too much going for this mode outside of what we already mentioned. One cool thing I wanted to mention was that there was a gun gambler perk that would act similar to the disorderly combat gobblegum from Black Ops 3, swapping out your weapons constantly, which provided for a awesome gameplay experience. But besides that, there really isn't much to go over with this mode to be honest, so let's move on. The next mode featured in this game was very different compared to what we have previously talked about, and it was called Undead Siege. Undead Siege was unique to Call of Duty Online, as it did not include a round counter similar to the modes we have discussed earlier, and instead functioned in a day-night cycle. Essentially, this mode saw you gathering materials upon spawning in, such as weapons, material debris, and grenades to stronger yourself to defend a central station from the oncoming horde. The main way to defend your station was found within the use of sentry turrets, while also using your own weapons and any other items you may have gathered while playing. After successfully defending the central station from the multitude of zombie types, the day would end and the station would move to a different location, allowing time for more of a arsenal to be built up to defend your station once more. There were even more enemy types featured in this modes such as a Juggernaut zombie, a zombie with a crown and a hammer, teleporting straitjacket zombies, and even the return of the running devil zombies from the previously mentioned mode. This mode was actually recreated into Call of Duty Mobile as a zombies minigame, and it could be played very similarly to what we saw within this game mode. However, besides that, there really isn't too much to this mode, as it is essentially just a defense from zombies while also improving your arsenal, making it one of the more one-of-a-kind modes in this game. The next mode that is within the Call of Duty Online game is called Doomday, and it is one of the weirdest versions of zombies in this game. Doomday and its gameplay surrounded around the idea of blowing up certain spires that dropped randomly across the map that you would have to blow up. In order to blow up these spires, certain colored bombs had to be acquired by killing these green tank-like zombies that were extremely difficult and annoying to take down. There were a record high of 7 maps within this mode, which were all remasters of previous multiplayer maps seen in the Modern Warfare and Black Ops series, with the maps being Standoff, Favela, Crossfire, Raid, Oasis, Crash, and Strike. The zombie bosses featured in this mode were some of the same with the other modes, with the zombies, teleporting zombies, and hellhounds returning with a new addition of bosses that look straight out of The Evil Within. Additionally, every 10 rounds in this mode saw the birth of one of the most overpowered bosses I have ever seen from any Call of Duty Zombies game ever, essentially being able to one-shot you if he gets close, while also wielding dual liquefier type weapons that would vaporize your player in an instant. Now, one of the craziest things about this mode, in my opinion, is the ability to choose your own character. I am not talking about operators or random military soldiers here. I am actually saying that this mode had an alternate reality to what we see with Primus and Ultimus. For example, we see the return of a regular Nikolai, while we also see a younger version of Richthofen, a girl version of Dempsey, and even a Takio-like character named Musha. Each character had their own unique weapons and abilities, similar to a character select in a game like Overwatch, and was a extremely strange but yet wildly interesting twist on the story and gameplay established by Treyarch. Health in this mode was also something worth mentioning, as when you get hit, your health did not automatically regenerate. Instead, the player would have to stand inside these health rings around the map in order to regenerate their health. This mode is certainly one of the weirder takes on zombies, and I cannot stress how much this game gets even crazier, so let's take a look at our next mode. The next mode within Call of Duty Online was called Aerial Reaper, and it only contained one map, being named Sunset City. This mode lives up to this name, as you genuinely are an aerial reaper, as you essentially fly through the air in a chopper gunner, rescuing people around the map while also killing everything in your path. There was a multitude of zombies types in this game, as well as UFOs, alien towers, and even spaceships that could all be destroyed with the gunner that had infinite ammo. Additionally, as you go around the map saving survivors, you would gain money that you could put towards a multitude of items, such as a stronger gun or even missiles that you could launch. From my knowledge, you were not able to exit the chopper gunner whatsoever, meaning you were glued to your seat the entire time, so having these upgrades was certainly a helpful thing. Once you rescued all of the survivors, you would be brought into a 3-stage boss battle with the giant alien-like creature who would launch missiles and even throw zombies at your chopper. It is important to mention that this mode could only be played solo, and that it did not exist in the final build of this game before its shutdown, meaning that it has been a very long time since anybody has ever seen remnants of this mode. The second to last mode I will discuss in this video was called Deus Ex. It's kind of hard to say because it's spelled really weird, and this was a mode very similar to the Zombie Havoc mode that we talked about earlier. There were 3 maps within this mode: Night Farm, Urban Legend, and Arsenal, with each of them essentially seeing the same process. This mode was very linear, similar to the Zombie Havoc mode, which is like the Left 4 Dead mode, making the players escort yet another APC across the map to certain locations, while also being able to upgrade it along the way, similar to the bus we see in transit. At the end of each map, there would be the huge alien boss seen in the Aerial Reaper mode that you would have to fight, with his attacks being upgraded seemingly, as he could now throw cars and even shoot grenades out of his back. Additionally, you can go inside his foot, similar to how the Origins robot works, which was a extremely weird mechanic that I was not expecting distracting when looking over gameplay. There were also these UFOs that would fly around the map that could abduct you, and if abducted you would be placed into a room with a multitude of bosses, which I thought was pretty cool. There were other smaller discrepancies between this mode and its sequel, Zombie Havoc, such as the fact that the APC had to be refueled along its journey occasionally. It is also worth mentioning this was also not in the final build of the game, and was clearly a predecessor to the Zombie Havoc mode seen later in the game's lifecycle. But with that, let's move on to the final mode within this game. The final mode that I will discuss in this game was titled Evacuation, and it featured 5 maps: Ambush, Sea Town, Estate, Bog, and Overgrown. Of course, these are all featured somewhere in the Modern Warfare series, and each map essentially played out in a very similar fashion. The player would go around rescuing survivors to aid them in escaping through the use of helicopters, while killing the small amount of enemy types found within this mode, all being a mix of a cyborg and a zombie for some reason. Once all of the necessary survivors were escorted out of the map, the player would then fight a huge alien ship that would enact multiple attacks while being essentially stationary. After the defeat of this boss, a exfil helicopter would spawn, and once the player got in, the mode was over. There really is nothing too special with this mode compared to what we have already seen, and it is also worth mentioning this mode was also not in the final build of the game before its shutdown. But besides that, that essentially wraps up everything with this final mode that I would like to talk about within Call of Duty Online. The purpose of me making this video was to shine light on honestly one of the more creative and goofy modes that I have ever seen in zombies, and while it has its problems and bugs, I still see the extreme passion the team had when developing this mode, especially with Zombie Havoc. I do want to make it very clear that I did not go into extreme detail with any of these modes. I tried my best to kind of summarize it for you guys, but I never really went too in depth with any of these modes. I would say go try it out for yourself, but unfortunately this game just doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. This obviously isn't the best title in the Call of Duty franchise, but it truly is a shame that this game is completely unplayable now, and that not a single soul will be able to experience playing these modes again. I would also like to mention that all the footage in this video is not mine, of course, because, you know, the game doesn't exist anymore, and all the credits for every bit of footage used will be in the description. However, this video has gone long enough, so with that said, I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.